So good morning, everyone. I'm Bill Helm, the chairman of the Board of Selectmen this year. And to my left here is Janet Kidder and B.B. Casey, my two colleagues. Kim Hallquist, the town manager, sitting down here in the front row, and hopefully we'll be able to answer all your questions this morning. But what we're going to do is start, first of all, I want to make an introduction. John Fortney, where are you, John? The new superintendent of the SAU 65, Kearsarge Regional School District. Welcome, John. John's recently in the process of moving here from Missouri, and he's going to stick around for the meeting this morning. So if you want to chat with him afterwards, he's the good-looking guy with the jacket on, just sitting in midway in the back there. So welcome, John. We're delighted to have you here in our community. What we're going to do this morning is begin with 4 short presentations about issues that are affecting the town that we think you'll be interested in. We're then going to follow that with a couple of updates on things that'll take 10, 15 seconds each, and then we'll do the questions and answers. We're going to ask you to hold your questions and comments and so on until after we get through the presentations, because some of the things that are said in one of them may impact another, and therefore would save a question or create maybe a different type of question. So sit tight and wait for the first 45 minutes or an hour here while we get through these initial presentations. I am going to be a bit of a timekeeper here this morning, so each of the 4 presentations, if you start to wander beyond the 10 or 15 minutes that we've asked you to spend, I may start squirming in my chair or something. So with that set up, the first presentation this morning, B.B. Casey's going to introduce.
Good morning, everybody. It's wonderful to see you all here on this absolutely spectacular day outside today. So I'm updating you. I'm introducing a couple of folks who are going to update you on the police facilities project. Just a little background, a committee has been formed with 9 community members to work with Colliers, the project managers, on the plans for the police communication facility in order to make recommendations to the selectmen this fall. We have hired architects from LaValle and Brensinger to work on the project, and this morning Chief Cobb and Ashley Siebold are going to give you all an update on what the committee has been doing. So I'll invite Ashley and Chief Cobb up to the front.
Hello, hello. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, BB. As she mentioned, my name is Ashley Siebold, and I'm representing the Police Facilities Committee. If any of you have spent any time with the Lordson, you know that brevity is not our strong suit, but I promise to keep this short and concise. As BB mentioned, the committee was formed back at the beginning of May. And our purpose here is, just as BB mentioned, we are to produce a recommendation to the select board in September on how to move forward with providing our police force with an updated facility. And really, when we think about that, there are 4 options. We could renovate the existing space. We could tear down the existing Bucher building, so not Whipple Hall, but the Bucher building, rebuild in the same footprint. We could build a brand new building on a separate plot of land. We could purchase a building and remodel it for the needs of the police station. And as BB mentioned, we have contracted with LaValle Brensinger as the architect, and they're here to support us through this phase of the project. We had a chance to meet with them just about 2 weeks ago, and I know that they took a tour of the facility while they were here. And what they are doing is working on and basically a needs assessment, and they'll create a program for us. I know Chief Cobb is feverishly working through a very long questionnaire that they provided to her, and we should have that program back to us in about a few weeks. That's really where this committee will spend the bulk of our time, is really looking at the program that they created. Also part of the work with LaValle Brensinger is they're contracted to do 2 test fits. So one on the current site, so whether that is remodeling, giving us a demo or a test fit of remodeling the current site or rebuilding on the current location, and then also a test fit of another location. I do want to take this opportunity to be very, very clear. Another site has not been selected. It's come to my attention, I think a lot of our attention, that there's been some misunderstanding, both through, I think, conversations within the community, but also from some news articles that another location has been selected. it has not. Or if it has, that's not known to any of us or the select board. But that's really the work of the select board. They will be using the criteria spreadsheet that Collier's provided them, and also all of the work that the Building and Facilities Subcommittee did back in 2021, 2022 to look at a potential other location. This committee is certainly here to support the select board should they ask us for some input on that, especially for the test fit. But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. And then I think my last update is just that the town was gracious enough to set up an email for this project. So if any community members have questions, comments, thoughts, we highly encourage you to email in to that email address, whatever your questions might be. What we'll do is take those questions. Please don't expect a response with whatever the response to your question will be. What we'll do is we'll take those questions, comments, suggestions, post them onto the page for the Police Facilities Committee on the town website. They will be posted anonymously, so we're not going to attach anybody's name, but that's where you will see the answer to your question. I'm trying to think if there's any other updates. Anything you would add, Chief Cobb? No. Nothing? All right, and I think we're saving questions till the bitter end, so I'm sure there will be some. We look forward to hearing them. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Ashley. Okay, the next item that we're going to touch on is zoning, planning, and housing. There's a housing crisis in New Hampshire. There's a housing crisis in New London. We've been doing a variety of things over the past year related with our planning board, with our housing commission, and I'm going to ask Janet to introduce this topic.
Good morning. The select board members serve on various committees. I am currently the selectman's representative to the planning board. Prior to becoming a selectman, I served on the planning board for 5 years. I enjoy being on the planning board because the issues that it deals with are so varied and are so impactful to our community. Subdivisions, commercial and multifamily developments, zoning amendments, the capital improvement program, often referred to as the CIP, and the town's master plan are all under the review of the planning board. There are 7 members on the planning board with 3 additional alternates. There are 5 members of the Zoning Board of Adjustment with 4 alternates. These folks volunteer an incredible amount of time serving on the Planning Board and the Zoning Board of Adjustment. Their job is to assure compliance with the zoning ordinance. Adam Ricker, the town's Planning and Zoning Administrator, and Tim Parity, the Planning Board Chair, are here to update you on what the Planning Board is working on. Fellows, you're on.
Good morning. The Rickers and the Laurisons share the poor brevity skills, and as the last meeting was an example of that, I think a couple of folks didn't get to go because Tim and I took too long. So we will try to be somewhat brief this time around. So as Janet mentioned, the housing crisis has been at the forefront of the Planning Board and the Housing Commission's work over the last 2 to 5 years. In that time, the Planning Board and the Housing Commission have worked cooperatively on a variety of different approaches. Some of them have been successful at town meeting and have resulted in at least some initial successes. If Twin Pines comes to completion, that will be a great success. And others, like this last town meeting season, perhaps were not as successful. I'm sure you're all aware that the zoning amendments did not pass. And that's okay. That provides the Planning Board some really important feedback that they need to further their work. And in that vein, the next 20 months will be spent with the Planning Board and the Housing Commission working very intensively on a project. If you're not aware, we've received a grant for a little bit more than $100,000 through the Housing Opportunities Program from the state of New Hampshire, the HOP grant. This was initially awarded last summer. However, there were some issues at the state level for moving forward with the funding. So we just got the funding 3 weeks ago. And so we will be embarking on that project now. As part of that project, we have hired Resiliency Planning and Design out of Plymouth, which is headed by Steve Whitman. Some of you may know Steve. He taught here at the college for several years. He now teaches at Plymouth State, along with his 3 colleagues there at Resiliency. He worked with us on a couple of other projects recently too, so you may have seen him at some meetings. So the Housing Commission is just getting into that process. We have the sort of baseline of what that project is going to look like that we had to write for the scope for the grant application, so that we know it'll be broken up into 3 distinct phases. The first phase will really focus on identifying the demographics, who we are, what does our built environment look like, what are the current housing in New London look like, where do we perhaps have some housing gaps, who lives here, do we have gaps in who lives here? And as part of that process in the first phase, Resiliency will be contracting out with a firm in Cambridge, Mass, that specializes in demographics. They have access to a significant number of databases that are very costly that we don't have access to, that go far deeper into the data than the census that's free does go. So we look forward to that first phase, which we will embark on this summer. That group from Cambridge will hopefully be doing their work end of summer, early fall. They're kind of squeezing us in to their already busy schedule. We can then hope to late October, early November, we will be holding a community forum speaker series. We don't know exactly what that will look like yet. We've started to have those conversations at the Housing Commission level. We're working on logistics of place and all of those things right now, so stay tuned on that, and we'll have more information. Once that phase is wrapped up, we will get into the second phase, which will be the time to really do visioning, similar to if you participated in the master plan process when we were looking at issues much wider than just housing and we did visioning. This one will be focused, more closely on housing, and that will be an entire multi-month process. And then the third phase is really that now we've identified who we are, what our built environment looks like, where we see ourselves in the future with the vision, how do we get there? And so that third phase is really the path forward. Are there regulatory changes we need to make? Maybe not, maybe there are. I mean, it's important that all of the board members, the commission members, community members, go into it not knowing what the answer is, because if we go in thinking we know exactly what we need to do in phase 3, then phases 1 and 2 really are not that valuable. So hopefully that will be a good process. So please stay tuned to that project. It will start to ramp up. We are in the process of identifying what media will be used to let you all know. I'm sure you can count on Municipal Matters and the Intertown Record and the Shopper as an integral part of that. As far as what other methods, we're to be determined, but certainly keep an eye on that. Moving on from housing a little bit, as Janet mentioned, the Capital Improvement Program is a product of the Planning Board. We will be embarking on that in the next couple of weeks. This is usually a relatively short but intense time period to get this information. We work closely with the department heads to lay out their projects over the next 10 years that are capital in nature. And so we have a pretty short window while department heads are preparing their budgets, because obviously they finish a fiscal year this week and they start on the next year's fiscal year budgets next week. And so it's a pretty short window between then and when they need to pass their budgets over to the Budget Committee and Selectmen. So that process will be starting. It's typically members of the Planning Board and the Budget Committee and the Select Board, which also reminds me, I see you in the front row, Charlie, we need to catch up after. So I think that's a pretty good update on what we've got going in front of us right now. Do you have anything you want to add, Tim?
No, just thanks, Adam. Just say that we're looking forward to working with the Housing Commission on this important issue for the next couple of years.
So hang on to those questions now. Now, the third item that we want to bring to your attention is a little bit different. This has to do with the management of our septic systems around the lakes in particular. And for that, we've asked Elizabeth Harper, the Executive Director of the LSPA, to talk to us this morning. Elizabeth?
Well, thank you all for the opportunity to come and talk to you today. I'm sure that many of you have been aware of the cyanobacteria blooms that have been occurring throughout New Hampshire and right here in our own backyards on Pleasant Lake at Elkins Beach recently. This is an issue that's becoming much more common, much more prevalent. Last year in New Hampshire, it was a record-breaking year for cyanobacteria blooms. And these can be toxic blooms that can occur and have human health impacts and have impacts for wildlife. And it's a growing concern, not only just for recreational purposes, because beaches end up being shut down, but it's also really important from an economic perspective. I think we're all fairly well aware of the importance of our lakes to recreation and tourism industry here in New Hampshire, and especially in our region. It's an incredibly important part of our tax base. There was an interesting study that was done just a couple of years ago by Dartmouth trying to assess the value of lake properties for tourism and for tax bases. And just as some examples of that, we see that property values fall $168,000 per kilometer distance away from lakes. There's a whole lot of really interesting economic data, and I won't get into that in a lot of detail, but I just wanted to touch on that as one of many reasons that I think we should all care and be concerned about this issue of cyanobacteria in our lakes. The driving cause of cyanobacteria blooms is the addition of nutrients into our lakes, and that comes from a whole variety of sources, and the stressors in those sources are increasing in many ways. So stressors include the increase in development that we're seeing. So as we add impervious surfaces, as we have more lawns that have fertilizers that are being applied, as we have runoff that's carrying that water into our lakes, we end up with more nutrients, and that's what feeds these cyanobacteria blooms and causes them to increase and to increase over time and to have these sort of periodic blooms that occur. So there are several different ways that we can address these issues. As we have increasing temperatures, we see more blooms. As we have decreased ice cover, we see more blooms. So there are some things that we don't have control over. And I think what's really important is that we think about what do we have control over in these systems that can reduce the chances and the frequency of these blooms occurring. So anything that we can do to reduce the amount of nutrients that are being input into the lake will reduce the prevalence of these occurring. One of the really low-hanging fruit options here is septic system maintenance. The failing septic systems can contribute a lot of nutrients into our lakes, which is bad for cyanobacteria blooms. Clearly, none of us want to be swimming or recreating in that either. So there are many, many reasons that we want to make sure that septic systems are maintained adequately so that we don't have septic effluent that's ending up in our waterways. It's an issue for cyanobacteria blooms and for health in general. So what I wanted to bring to you today are some stories of some other communities that have tried to address this at the local level, and there are a few different ways that this can be done. Essentially, for septic systems to not fail, they need to be maintained regularly, and part of that maintenance is pumping septic systems about every 3 years is what's recommended. We do see a lot of failing systems. Sometimes it's because they're old. Sometimes it's because people don't know that they should be maintaining them. Sometimes they're new systems, but people are flushing things down into their septic systems that cause them to fail, and they don't realize that that's occurring. So a lot of what needs to happen for the septic systems to be maintained in a way that's good for our water quality and for our lakes really involves education. So we can do a lot of education, but there are some other tools that can be really effective as well. So recently, just this last year in Sunapee, we were able to get health regulations through with the select board. And essentially what that means is that all residents in Sunapee will get a letter every 3 years reminding them that they need to pump their septic system. And they're required to submit a receipt to the town, and the town tracks that to make sure that those septic systems around the lakes are being maintained. In Sunapee, those regulations were limited just to the shoreland district. In other towns in New Hampshire, they've decided to have these regulations apply state or town-wide. So there are different decisions that towns can make as they implement these regulations. They can either be brought to the select board from the health officer, because it's a health issue and they can be voted on by the select board and go through, or they can come to town meeting and the community as a whole can vote on them as an ordinance. So there are a few different ways, process-wise, that can happen. And some of that just depends on what the community wants and what their support for. So that's partly what I wanted to bring to you all today, is just to get a sense from your community of if this is a direction that you might be interested and willing to go to try to increase protection for the lakes. And if so, if there are questions that you might have about the different ways that you might proceed with that. So LSPA likes to work collaboratively with town governments and with other lake associations. So there's the Messer Pond Association, Pleasant Lake Association that are also concerned about similar issues. So I just wanted to come today to sort of offer an opportunity for discussion about this issue and to be able to answer questions and to get a discussion started about what I think is an opportunity to take advantage of some low-hanging fruit in terms of what we can do, what's actionable to improve water quality in our lakes. So I know we're holding questions until later, and I'll leave it there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Janet and Bibi and I try to divide up different things that we do, and in regard to this issue of working with the other towns around the lakes, Bibi has been spending a lot of time diving into this, so she's our board expert on this and has been working closely with Elizabeth. So the last of the four topics that we wanted to talk to you about before we got into questions and so on has to do with what's going on with our Department of Public Works. As many of you probably have heard, Bob Harrington, after almost 35 years of service to the town, is going to retire at the end of next month and is being replaced by Sam Clark. So we've asked Kim Hallquist to sit down here or stand up here this morning with Sam and Bob and talk a bit about what's going on in the Department of Public Works and how this transition might take place. And this is going to probably cover everything from potholes to sidewalks to goodness knows what at the transfer station. So take it away.
As Bill mentioned, Sam will be our next Public Works Department Director for the town of New London. Sam will be our third Public Works Director following Richard Lee and Bob Harrington, who will leave us next month sometime, end of the month, we think. Sam is our current wastewater supervisor, so he has supervision of the entire wastewater department, and that includes sewer mains and pump stations from New London all the way to the town of Sunapee to their wastewater treatment plant. He started with New London 9 years ago in a Labor 1 position in the highway department and then transferred over to the wastewater department. He's currently fire chief in the town of Wilmot, so he has some experience in managing people and equipment in very high stress situations, which will serve him well in his new position, I'm sure. The Public Works Department includes highway, which is maintenance of all of the town roads, wastewater, which I mentioned is our sewer department, the transfer station, which is everybody's favorite place to visit, you're all familiar with that, cemeteries, and also town buildings and town properties. It's the biggest department in terms of full-time employees and budget, so it's a big job. The selectmen and I were impressed with Sam's enthusiasm for the position and his dedication to the town so far, and his willingness to take on a challenge. It's a very big job. So we're thrilled that he's agreed to take on the job. And as much as I hate to see Bob retire, when he came to my office that Monday morning to tell me, I was upset for sure. I said, Bob, you're a lot younger than me, but he has been with the town for many years, so he does deserve to coast a little bit. So we're happy to have Sam in the department. And with that, I will turn it over to both Bob and Sam for their updates on the Public Works Department.
Thank you. Just going to touch base on a few projects that we're working on. Well, I got a little bit of a list here. The first thing that I'm going to touch base on is sidewalks. Obviously, we can't do anything with sidewalks right now until this project is complete, which they're moving along pretty well on, I believe. They've had some minor setbacks with some pressure testing, but they're still plugging forward. One of the things that we're doing is we're staying in contact with the Bike Pedestrian Advisory Committee. I see Russ sitting over there. We've had a couple meetings. Sam's going to continue with that. We've shared ideas with him that I've had a list looking at different roads over the years that probably could be addressed for adding. My biggest concern is I think we should address what we have here first and correct them, starting down at Holman's Corner, working our way up. Trying to address the worst places first. That's going to be Sam's big task. So hopefully he'll come out looking like a hero for everybody. Let's see, the other thing that we have on the wastewater end of things is we've got a slip lining project that's going to be done on Squires Lane. That, I believe, is within the next couple weeks, correct? And that is to address water infiltration that gets into the system, which we end up paying for. So that's an ongoing thing that wastewater's been working on, trying to get that under control, sending less water to Sunapee that we get charged for. Another thing on my list, I'd like to apologize, first of all, for the confusion with the transfer station. We had it closed for a training, and there was a lot of, I blame myself more than anybody. We didn't have the proper signage out. That has since been addressed. Hopefully moving forward, we'll be able to convey the message that we're going to be closed so we don't have that problem in the future. We picked up a couple of sandwich boards. We're using the signboard, any means that we can for unusual closings over there. So I apologize to everybody for that. Let's see. We've been working with the Waste Reduction Committee. One of the big things, and I'm sure you've seen the ads, is foam recycling. It doesn't take a lot of weight out of the trailers as they go to the landfill, but it does take the product out of the landfill, which is huge. They have worked really hard on composting. That does affect what goes to the landfill as far as weight. From my standpoint, that's huge because of the budget. Also, we have taken books out of the waste stream. We have a company that has been picking up the books, no charge. They take them, distribute them to third world countries, or pull out textbooks for college students, whatever it may be. It's all on their dime. Doesn't cost the town anything, but it saves a huge amount in weight that goes to the landfill. There's a lot of weight there. The other thing is clothing. We recycle clothing that pulls a lot of weight out of the waste stream. And all three of these together have been a huge success for the transfer station. And then lastly, I thought I'd end on a good note. I know everybody was concerned about newspaper or mixed paper, the fact that I took it away. I apologize for that, but there was concerns over the place we used to take it was up in White River. They shut down. We had to go to Wilmington, Mass, and the problem that I was faced with was budget issues. It was costing me about $3,000 a month just to transport the stuff, and I had to pay about $50 a ton. Now, I'm happy to say that we brought the box back. We're planning on July 1st. So, White River, fortunately, has redesigned their building up there, and they actually are accepting it again. So it's actually going to be huge for us. So the box is over the transfer station. Be patient. Try to plan on the 1st. Let them get it situated with signage and the right steps so everybody's safe when they go to get in it. And then happy recycling. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sam.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Kim. I'd like to start by just thanking the Board of Selectmen for choosing me to move forward with the Public Works Department and grow there. I'm very excited to do that. Excited to be here. Good morning, everyone, and hopefully maybe answer some questions at the end. But Bob did a great job touching on all the various committees and departments within the town that he works with as Public Works Director, and I'm excited to continue that and continue to hopefully move the town forward and grow our team at the Public Works Department and continue to do good road work, transfer station, wastewater. You're in great hands between myself, Bob passing down all of his information, and then all the employees we have there. And lastly, I'd like to just thank Bob for training me over the last couple months and being a good leader and mentor to me and friend as well. So thank you.
So for those of you who want to thank Bob for what he's accomplished over the years, on July 17th, late in the day, there will be a reception to honor his service for the town. More to be seen on the town website, municipal matters, and so on. So we've seen Chief Cobb, and we've seen Adam Ricker, our planner, and we've seen Bob, our DPW head. We actually have several other really outstanding department heads. Kim Hallquist has assembled over the last several years an amazing group of people. So in addition to those three, you notice the selectmen aren't doing a lot of talking this morning. We're letting the people actually do the work about it. But I just want to recognize Jay Lyon, our fire chief, and Will Kidder, our town clerk and tax collector, and Lynn Lewis, the...
Stand up, folks,
Yeah,
and give a
stand up.
wave.
Come on.
There we go.
There's Will. Lynn Lewis, our finance officer, and Putnam Kidder, our recreation director. This is just a great group of people. That makes our job easy. So I promised you a few little quickies before we get to the questions and answers. I think there's probably nothing to say more about the water mains. You do know the water main project is a project of the New London Springfield Water Precinct, not the selectmen, but we think they're doing an excellent job. They're working hand in glove with the police department and with DPW to try to make it as smooth as possible. It will continue on for several more months, but they're getting started on the second phase, which is actually phase 3 for them, starting down at Newport Road and coming to Parkside, and then the last piece in the middle will be done sometime toward the end of the summer. In terms of Longmeadow Commons and the New London Place, the two large housing projects on County Road, I understand that subject to a few more permitting things, it takes forever to permit, that those projects should finally be getting off the ground before the snow falls. Let's put it that way. The library has a new director as of July 1st. Richard Tutwiler is coming from Flagstaff, Arizona, where he has served as the head of reference and then as deputy director of city services for the 7 libraries in Flagstaff, Arizona. So we're all looking forward to welcoming Richard to town at about the same time that John's coming to town. So we've got 2 new leaders. Elizabeth mentioned cyanobacteria. You may know there's been a warning on Pleasant Lake that was lifted 2 days ago, and so we're back to normal operation as far as that's concerned right now. Fireworks, the selectmen last year passed an ordinance that allows fireworks only 4 times during the year. One of them is over the 4th of July, which is always tricky because the question is, when does the 4th of July begin and end? And this year we've declared that it begins on this Saturday on the 29th and ends on July 6th. That encompasses whatever's going on in the town of Sunapee and what's going on with the Pleasant Lake Association's annual fireworks show. So we've got a week-long July 4th celebration for fireworks. I guess with that, I will turn it over to whatever you would like to talk about, and we'll see if we can field your questions.
Art Scutro, West Side Drive. I want to thank the board, Kim, and more importantly, Bob, for improving our road. We now have not only a shoulder, but he eliminated the frosty washboard we had to ride over to get to our homes. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Art. When you do speak, please identify yourself because we are recording this. I should have said that at the beginning. Anybody else? Goodness, we can't possibly have answered all your questions.
Thank you, Kim. Bill Hopwood Elkins. Will we be responsible for submitting a receipt for pumping of our septics? Is that going to be adopted by the town?
Bibi, you want to take that one on?
Sure. Not right away. We're discussing the idea of septic regulations right now. We're looking at surrounding towns and around the state that have done it, and we're trying to figure out which way we want to do it, if at all. We're hoping to have something for a town meeting this March for the voters to vote on.
So there's an issue that you should probably want to spend some time at the selectmen's meetings and the planning board meetings as we get ready for town meeting. That's several months off, but the discussion begins now, and we're going to learn from what's happening in Sunapee and Newbury and determine whether it fits the same size fits all of us, or maybe we're a different town than the others. We'll see.
John?
John? Turn it the other way.
Phoebe, when considering the receipts for septic, so may I make a suggestion, please? Would the town be willing to consider situations where a house might only be used 30 to 60 or 70 days a year versus a house used all the time? I'm certainly happy to pump, but not every 3 years.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, that will be part of the procedure that we hopefully are able to put in place. Newbury tried to pass something this past year, and that was one of the procedures. There was a waiver form that could be filled out for people if, only 2 people live in a house, don't necessarily need to pump the septic every 3 years. There will be a process, is the way I'm thinking about it, yes.
Patricia Goodland, New London. I know Adam gave a presentation about the housing situation and the various phases, but I had a specific question in terms of town meeting when the petitioned amendment number 6 was, which had to do with lodging houses. When that was initially at the beginning of the town meeting, it was defeated, and then toward the end, there was another vote or procedure that seemed to indicate it would be looked at again, and I was a little uncertain as to where that stood, or if indeed it is part of what Adam was talking about, the 3 phases. So I had a question about how that seemed to sort of be reversed toward the end of the town meeting. Thank you.
And here's Adam.
I'm not sure, Pat, exactly what the reversal is. I don't know if I follow that, but specifically on that piece, it was relating to short-term rentals, and it was a petition zoning amendment that, unfortunately, the way it was written, town council advised us that it would not be able to be implemented properly, that we couldn't enforce it. So in the context of short-term rentals, on a larger conversation, I think that probably is something that will be discussed throughout the housing project, because they play a key role in the overall housing landscape in a town. I'm not sure exactly where that will go. I can tell you that Kim and I have had some early meetings with some neighbors of a short-term rental that there was concern what that will look like. I know that the fire department, we've had conversations with them too from their perspective of what their concerns are. So it's multifaceted, whether we take it from a life safety approach or a land use approach, and it's really too early to know what that'll look like. I wouldn't be surprised if that ball starts rolling long before the conclusion of the 24-month housing project. So I think that they may be working in tandem a bit, and then ultimately, if there's some part of the overall housing grant project that tells us that we should approach it in a different manner, we would address that at that point.
Ashley, you didn't mention that your regular meetings are approximately every 2 weeks on Friday morning. So for those of you that are really interested in the police facility issue, I can't imagine it's not everybody in the room. Don't wait for the selectmen. We're waiting for the advisory committee now, which meets again tomorrow morning, I believe, at 8:30 in Whipple Hall, and their meetings are being videoed and seen online if you don't like to get up at 8:30 and go to the meetings. But we have these 9 citizens that represent you all that are working on this project, as Ashley tried to explain. So please don't hesitate to show up at those meetings and find out what's going on. Don't wait until September or October when they start to make recommendations to us.
I had a quick question for the Maureen Prohl Elkins. I had a question from the young lady from the Lake Sunapee Protective Association. And my question is in regards to what about the feeder creeks and into lakes, the wetlands all around the lakes? How do you assess, if you can even assess, I have no idea, where the cyanobacteria is coming from? Is there a way to say, oh, there's a high density in this area of the lake, which is where this creek comes in, or, you know?
Yeah. So there are a few different pieces, I think, to that question that are really important. So when we think about the watershed and what's coming into the lake, you're absolutely right. It's really important to remember that all of that water is running off of the land through creeks and streams into the lake, and everything that's being carried along ends up in the lake, and that's part of what's contributing nutrients that cause the cyanobacteria blooms. And I know from talking to Nick Baer, who's your health officer here, that a lot of the septic system failures that have been documented are coming from those tributaries. So it's not just the homes along the lake that are an issue, but it's also what's happening upstream.
I think that's really important to note.
So that's something to consider when there are discussions about sort of the extent to which, what geographic area a regulation might apply to.
A second question is, if we're talking about septic systems, wouldn't there also be E. coli in the mix?
Yeah. So there's E. coli also.
Does that feed the cyanobacteria, or are they just two cook?
Yeah, so they're both organisms that are feeding off of nutrients, and they come from the E. coli are in the septic systems, and that's one of the sources. When we have E. coli outbreaks, that can be one of the sources as well. So they're related, but not the same thing. But a lot of
it's not cause effect. It's just a relationship. Yeah, that they share nutrients, or they need nutrients.
Exactly. So any of those nutrient inputs that we're concerned about can impact both of those water quality issues.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Wants to follow up on that. So.
Yes.
Mark Scutro, follow-up West Side Drive. Is Otter Pond included in your survey? Otter Pond, we would feed into that from where we live.
Yeah, so. Right, so Otter Pond is in the Lake Sunapee watershed. So within New London, some of your lakes and ponds are in the Lake Sunapee watershed and some are not. Our organization focuses on what's going on in the watershed, but we also work with any of the towns sort of throughout the area that have at least part of the town in the watershed. So we do water quality monitoring throughout that area.
I just want to thank you for working with Nick Baer, because I know his students have done a lot of work, and there's a summer program where he's continued to work on Pleasant Lake, so thank you for including
Yeah, we should definitely give a huge shout out to those students that Nick is working with, and you're, as a community, really lucky to have Nick Baer as both the health officer and also faculty here at Colby-Sawyer, who's working with students and training them to collect a lot of this water quality data too. They've really done a phenomenal job and provided a lot of good data that is helpful, especially on Pleasant Lake.
I see a hand somewhere in the back here. Yes.
Thank you. I'm Gary Anderson, Little Sunapee Road. I wanted to just get a sense of the town's current thinking on detached ADUs.
Sure, absolutely. I'll get Adam Ricker back up here for that.
I don't think we have current thinking, Gary. Obviously, the result of the town meeting was a decision on that particular ordinance. I'm not sure that applies to all detached accessory dwelling units. That will be something that we work to figure out through the housing project. Certainly that's a piece of a solution for the housing crisis. It's certainly not the only piece. But I think part of that project is going to be listening to decide what our current thinking is, because obviously I think that there was a I don't want to say disagreement, but a difference in opinion from the folks working on the proposal and the folks voting. So I think now those groups have the time to put the work in and figure out what the path forward, if there's a path forward for changing it. And just to add to that, the legislation that was at the state level regarding ADUs did not pass this year, so that gives us a little bit more breathing room to do work on our side to, who knows, the next legislative session or the one after that, if maybe it's a question that's eventually forced, but hopefully we now have the time to address it locally.
So I'm going to surprise the moderator and see that he's sitting here. Michael, I believe there's a couple of elections coming up, I hear. Do you have anything you might add? Tell the people about what you're doing. Not only is there an election in November, but there's one in September also. And is there anything unusual going to happen with elections this year?
Boy, I love being put on the spot.
Michael Todd, the town moderator.
Let's see. Will and I, plans are in place for these upcoming elections. As a matter of fact, I just had to provide for him, at the request of the Democratic Committee, a list of all of the Democratic inspectors of election that worked in 2020 and 2022. This is just part of the endless data that people are requesting of the town moderator, and I'm thankful that I have the ability to keep that data in a manner that I can produce it on pretty short notice. Other than that, Will, I can't think of any. We do have a new ballot counting device, but I don't believe that will be in place for the September or November elections. Other than that, we're just reviewing our procedures and scheduling some training sessions for our inspectors, because training has become, or education of those folks, training is what you do for dogs, so it's education of our people that we want to make sure they're well aware of all of their duties and responsibilities on election day. The stronger the team becomes, the less likely there'll be any hiccups during the election. Other than that, Will, unless I forgot something, I think that, yeah, we're good? We're good? Okay. Anyone have any questions?
So well, as with all our department heads, we're very fortunate, Michael, to have you looking after things, particularly in what's going to be a very interesting election cycle, I think. So thank you.
I think you're absolutely right, and I'm going to take this opportunity to thank all of the inspectors of election that we currently have. There's almost 100 volunteers in the pool that we have to choose from to staff these elections, and it takes between 40 and 50 of them to run an election, because we do it in shifts, and not everyone is always available. But I'm really, truly thankful to have such a huge pool of well-qualified people and enthusiastic people to choose from to run the elections. Some towns really have to struggle to get volunteers, and I am so thankful that we are not one of them. So, thank you again.
Sorry to surprise you, Michael, but I just saw you sitting there and I couldn't help myself. Anything else that people want to raise or so on? This is an awfully calm gathering.
I'm John Ellis. I had a question on the water supply. One of my concerns is that the water precinct says that they can add about 1.5 units per year, and the fact that Twin Pines is not able to connect to the precinct at the time, they have to drill their own wells, and with the expansion that we're looking at for housing and the visioning work that Adam and Tim are doing, are we including, I hope we are including the water precinct in these discussions as well, because I think the Colby Point supply of water we ought to look at over the next years ahead as we connect, because if we're going to be expanding and adding more housing, that's going to be an issue. And also, is there any possibility that the water precinct meetings could be posted also on our website, so that, because I know they're two separate items, and included in these discussions is invited to the meetings as we progress.
So thank you, John, for raising that. For the past year, I have been a regular attendee at the water precinct meetings, and now Janet is taking a turn at doing that. The water precinct meetings are at 4 o'clock on the first Monday of every month. I suppose they could be added to the town calendar, but for those of you who, a few of you do attend those with us, and that's good. John raises a very long-term question, which is about the viability of the water supply for those of us who are not on wells. And the answer is that the water precinct is itself engaging in some very long-term studies of additional sites and so on that probably will come to fruition in the next 10 to 20 years. So it's a slightly longer project, and right now they're totally focused on getting this water main project on Main Street completed without any major hiccups. I don't know, Janet, if in the last 2 months since you've been going to the meetings, is there any updates other than that?
No, not really.
Okay. Well, thank you for asking, John. It's a long-term project, and the selectmen are spending a lot of time making sure that we're up to date on what they're doing.
And Bill, if I could also add, the water precinct is treated like a town department for purposes of the planning board. They're always notified of projects. There's a meeting of department heads, the fire chief and public works. So they're intricately connected with the town as far as what's going on in planning. So we keep them up to date on that, and they can participate and give comments.
So we have several of these situations where we work with other towns with cooperative things. The water is one, the town sewer system is another with the town of Sunapee. We do our assessment work with both Newbury and Sunapee, and the selectmen are engaged in participating in all of those different activities. In fact, the three of us, Janet and Bibi and I, are, believe it or not, the sewer commissioners for New London also. Most people don't know that. Other questions, updates, so on? Karen, anything from the state you'd like to talk about? I see Karen Ebel, our state representative here. She can't get away without having an opportunity to speak also.
Well, thank you very much, and thanks to everybody that's doing all the hard work for the town. I was considering whether to raise my hand, and you nailed me before
Well, you knew I'd get to you, right?
I didn't. I just want to say that all the discussions here are a microcosm of what we talk about all the time at the state level. There's the housing discussion, there's the environmental discussion, there's always the voting discussion, and you know, there are a lot of legislators that are trying to solve a lot of the problems, I think, with really hard, fast red lines, especially as far as housing is concerned, and some of the other issues. And really, the towns have to, I think, in many cases, kind of figure it out for themselves. And that's what I think New London is doing a really good job at, because there's a lot to figure out, especially because a lot of the discussions can't be held in isolation. They have to, you know, like if you're talking about housing, you have to think about infrastructure issues, you have to think about environmental issues, you have to think about a whole variety of issues as you try to figure out what's the right thing for the town. So I did just, I wanted to follow up, actually, the reason I would have raised my hand, is to follow up on Elizabeth Harper's discussion, and it's just something that I wanted to ask the board. So when I first started getting involved in local government here, I was asked to be a member of the Conservation Commission. That was in 1990. And at the time, the Conservation Commission was given a non-voting position on the planning board. And we fought for a couple of years, and then we were able to get a voting position for a Conservation Commission member on the planning board. So, and the other thing is that the Conservation Commission at that time, there were people really interested in trail work, and there were people that were interested in policy work. So over time, and then I served as what I call the dually for quite some time, and then like Tim Parody, I became chair of the planning board, and I resigned my position with the Conservation Commission, but then I was replaced, I think, with Sue Andrews at the time. So I'm not saying this as a criticism, I'm asking it more as a question. I mean, at this point, it's my understanding that the Board of Selectmen no longer appoints somebody from the Conservation Commission onto the Planning Board to sort of be a voice for issues relating to cyanobacteria, flooding of lakes, any number. I mean, I remember when we were on the Conservation Commission, we talked a lot about ways to do things better with stormwater, et cetera. So at this point, I don't think that there's a lot of policy work being done at the Conservation Commission on the environmental issues related. That may relate to who is on it and what their interests are. I think it's a really important voice that has been missing, and I think the selectmen and other folks are trying their best to sort of fill that issue. And I guess one of the questions I wanted to ask is whether the decision not to appoint a Conservation Commission member was like an active decision, if it's something the board would reconsider, and if maybe the Conservation Commission could do more policy work.
Janet, I'm going to put you on the spot.
I don't have an answer for you. We don't. Maybe Adam does. I don't.
Adam to
It
the
wasn't.
rescue here.
We haven't had anyone from the Conservation Commission on the planning board since I've been a selectman, and this is my 11th year as a selectman, and I've been on the planning board off and on those 11 years. So I don't know what the decision, if there was any decision made about conservation. Maybe you know, Adam.
Sure. And I'm not sure what the law was in 1990. Admittedly, I was, 2. But at this point, the state law is for a member of the planning board that has the ability to serve on the Conservation Commission. So it's actually the opposite. And we did have that actively. Tim was previously the conservation rep from the planning board, and then Joe Cubitt was most recently the planning board member that served on the Conservation Commission. And I'm not honestly sure why the Conservation Commission no longer has a planning board member. I don't think it was necessarily intentional. I don't think that it was a decision as far as the selectmen appointing or not choosing to appoint somebody. I think that there was a member that didn't have the time to be on 2 boards, but kept their planning board seat at that time.
And I guess I would second what Janet said as former chairman of the planning board and 2 terms on the board of selectmen. I don't think there's ever been a conscious decision. It just has happened. So thank you, Karen, for raising it and maybe putting it a little higher up on the priority as we think about appointments.
And just put it out there too that I meet with Bob Brown at least a couple times a week. I think we chat by phone or in person, and it's also convenient that the Conservation Commission files are in the closet outside my door. So when the Conservation Commission members are in the office, I do at least get to interface with them on a fairly regular basis. Although obviously the planning board members aren't hanging out in my office. But
did you want to follow up?
I just wanted to add one other thing.
Oh.
I do know that the Conservation Commission was interested in having people who could actually do work, like clean trails, that sort of thing, and they didn't really have a lot of extra time to discuss policy. So with the chairman of the Conservation Commission talking to Adam all the time, it seemed like if there were issues, they would come up and they would be brought to us. So I think the Conservation Commission was more interested in having actual workers on the team, and because they have, I don't know how many miles of trails, but it's a huge number, and it takes a lot of maintenance to keep them safe and walkable.
Did you want to follow up, Karen? You look like.
Well, I mean, I appreciate the discussion. I don't mean to hammer it home, but I think that it's really important that there's sort of environmental policy type home within the town. Because everybody is doing a lot of really important work, and I know the selectmen have done it, and the trail work needs to be done. But I mean, even just for coordination with I don't know, Lake Sunapee Protective Association. I know you guys are going to be doing a little bit more. Anyway, the point is, I just would really like the selectmen and the Conservation Commission to try to think a little bit more about being more actively involved in some of the policy work. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Anything else? So I will remind you that we have a very vibrant website now, and that if you need information, it doesn't take very long to get onto it and to find just about everything you want. Kim and the staff produce Municipal Matters at least once a month. It goes out to over 1,000 households in town now, so if you're not on that list, please get on it. It usually has excellent information. I think we depend more on that now than we do the local paid media for information. And last of all, the Water Precinct also has an excellent new website that has information on it, including up-to-date every day on what's going on with the water main project. So there are a lot of pieces of information available both from the town and from the Water Precinct. Kim, anything else that you'd like to?
I think John Ellis is waving me down, so if we can take one more.
Okay.
Is there any possibility that the police committee could either have a meeting on Saturday morning so more could attend, or on Monday at 5:30? Okay, thank you.
Lynn, okay. Maureen?
I just wanted to remind people, if you have your compost survey, if you will drop it off in the basket as you leave the room. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming, and we look forward to having a great summer here in New London.